welcome back to Book March Madness. My name is Lee and I will be your ref for this competition. Man, it has been a tumultuous first round. I am up very early this morning trying to get everything all ready to go for the second round of voting. There were quite a few close calls in terms of which titles pulled ahead. There were many comfortable wins of some of the expected titles that were going to do well. And then there were also several upsets, some of them pretty significant. So I am ready to share with you the results of the first round of voting. Thank you to all of you who participated. It really does make this competition more fun the more people there are voting. It was a blast watching all of the votes come in. We actually did have an overtime, which I had not planned or prepped for. I did not anticipate people to be fighting tooth and nails this early in the competition. I expected it to happen later on, but we had an overtime. And so just as a brief housekeeping rule, if towards the end of the 48-hour period there is a tie, there will be a 5-hour overtime that will be posted to my Instagram feed, and if you follow me on Facebook, it is also on my Facebook profile. It will only run for 5 hours. I have my timer on my phone, and then whatever amounts of votes either of those books get, they will be added to the total number of votes that they have at the time. So yeah, that was a slapdash maneuver that I had to do yesterday. So here's how it's going to work in terms of revealing the results of the voting. I will go through each bracket. I will talk about the close calls first, which books were neck and neck, and at the end of the voting period had maybe 1 or 2 votes between them deciding who the winner was. Then we will go through the comfortable wins, so the books that were expected to win that did win comfortably, and then we'll talk about the upsets. And with the upsets, I will talk about mostly why I think, in my own opinion, those books did so well. So without further ado, let's get into talking about the results. First up, let's talk about the close calls of the classics bracket. We only really had one that was sort of a nail-biter up until the end, and that was The Great Gatsby and Fahrenheit 451. They were within 2 votes of each other, and at the end, The Great Gatsby finally pulled ahead and won by 2 votes, which means that Fahrenheit 451 is no longer in the competition. We had quite a few comfortable wins in this particular bracket, 5 in total of the predicted titles that were ranked higher that won comfortably. The first is with the pairing of The Catcher in the Rye with In Cold Blood. The Catcher in the Rye took it handily, In Cold Blood only getting a fraction of the votes that The Catcher in the Rye did. The next comfortable win is between The Book Thief and Eleanor Oliphant. People showed up for The Book Thief. There was a massive amount of votes for The Book Thief and only a handful for Eleanor Oliphant, which is a little of a bummer because I know there are a lot of people who really enjoyed this story. But The Book Thief took it handily, so Eleanor Oliphant is out of the competition. The next comfortable win comes between The Help and The Underground Railroad. I don't think The Underground Railroad has been read by many people, and I think people definitely love both the book, The Help, and the movie, because The Help took it pretty readily. So The Underground Railroad is now out of the competition. Next, we have a comfortable win that I anticipated, even though I really wanted the underdog to do well in this particular matchup, but that is between Where the Crawdads Sing and The Remains of the Day. I love The Remains of the Day. It's a Nobel Prize winner for literature. Kazuo Ishiguro is an exceptional author, and it was one of my favorite books I've ever read. But Where the Crawdads Sing rose up, and a lot of people showed up for that book. Again, I think it's mostly because not a lot of people have read The Remains of the Day, despite it being, I think, the pinnacle of New Age classics. So that unfortunately lost the competition. And the last comfortable win in the classics bracket is between A Man Called Ove and Wolf Hall. I kind of anticipated this happening as well, even though I didn't really predict it. But again, not a lot of people I think have read Wolf Hall, but there are very dedicated friends of mine who love that book a lot, and they showed up for it, but unfortunately Friedrich Bachmann took it by a hefty margin, and so Wolf Hall is out of the competition. Now let's talk about the upsets in the classics bracket. First up, we have Lolita and Animal Farm. Animal Farm took this by a landslide, which I thought was a little surprising, given that this is political commentary, and this at least has a little bit more, I would say, scandalous content. However, I think because it has scandalous content, particularly events surrounding predatory behavior, I don't think a lot of people support that book. It also is a little bit obscure, even though it is ranked as one of the greatest classics. But I think a combination of those two things might prevent people from voting for it. That's my own opinion. It would be why I wouldn't vote for it. So Lolita is now out of the competition, and Animal Farm by George Orwell advances on. Now let's talk about the biggest upset in the classics bracket. I was impressed by the amount of people who so decisively voted on this particular matchup, because Little Women, who is an 8th-ranked title, absolutely crushed A Tale of Two Cities, which is number 1, which hurts my heart a little bit because A Tale of Two Cities is one of my all-time favorite classic books. But yeah, Little Women absolutely blew it out of the water by a huge margin. So A Tale of Two Cities is unfortunately out of the competition, and we don't really have a French piece of classic literature in the competition anymore, which makes me a little sad, but it is what it is. Let's move on to the mystery thriller bracket. We had a couple close calls. This first one actually technically was an upset, and that is In Between The Hound of the Baskervilles and In the Woods. In the Woods by 1 vote upset Hound of the Baskervilles, which I thought was pretty surprising because it's Sherlock Holmes, and to me that's almost quintessential mystery thriller. But unfortunately, the only Sherlock Holmes title on this bracket is now out of the competition, displaced by Tana French. Next, our other close call also technically is as well an upset, and that is between Rebecca and Shutter Island, and Shutter Island pulled ahead by 2 votes of Rebecca, which again, I had predicted that Rebecca might take it because there has been an uptick in popularity in that title, but unfortunately it was not enough to have it go on in the competition, so Shutter Island will advance. Let's move on to the comfortable wins in the mystery thriller bracket. Obviously, our number 1 title, Miss Agatha Christie, and Then There Were None, pretty handily overtook The Moonstone, even though this was our wild card title. The next comfortable win is between The Girl on the Train and The Postman Always Rings Twice. The Girl of the Train is a little bit more of a recent, I would consider, champion, and The Postman Always Rings Twice was a little bit more of an obscure title, so that particular matchup wasn't really a surprise to me. And next we had the number 1 ranked rookie release from the Goodreads Awards. That is The Guest List by Lucy Foley up against The Lost Man by Jane Harper. Lucy Foley won pretty handily. I kind of expected that to happen as well. And the last comfortable competition is between Home Before Dark and The Sundown Motel. Home Before Dark pretty much won in a landslide. We did have a couple upsets in this bracket, usually within about 6-7 votes of each other. But the first one is between The Silent Patient, which is ranked number 2, and The Turn of the Key, which is ranked number 7, and Ruth Ware pulled ahead, which was kind of my prediction that she was going to do well in this particular competition. So The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides is out of the competition. And the last upset, again within 6 or 7 votes, is between My Sister the Serial Killer and When No One Is Watching, and Alyssa Cole right now. That title is pretty popular, despite my own personal feelings about the ending, which I thought was a little disappointing, but it overtook My Sister the Serial Killer, which surprised me a little because this one did so well in the Goodreads Awards. But When No One Is Watching is moving on in the competition. Moving on to the romance bracket and the close calls that were in the romance bracket, we're going to start with the less controversial one, and that is between Beach Read and Regretting You. Beach Read is ranked higher, but Regretting You, within 1 vote, pulled ahead of Beach Read. So Beach Read by Emily Henry is now out of the competition, and Miss Colleen Hoover's Regretting You will be moving on to the second round. And perhaps the most controversial close call was between The Notebook and The Princess Bride, which did put us into a 5-hour overtime, which was surprising. I did not expect them to be that evenly matched. But they were dead even. They were deadlocked for almost the entirety of yesterday until the overtime was instituted. But The Princess Bride pulled ahead by 2 votes. As soon as the polls were finished, we had a couple last-minute voters who swayed it, which means that The Princess Bride, an 8-ranked title, has just knocked out the #1 title, The Notebook. We had a few comfortable wins in the romance bracket, the first being between one ranked Red, White, and Royal Blue and Things You Save in a Fire, and Red, White, and Royal Blue, which was a pretty big superstar of the past year or so by Casey McQuiston, pretty handily took it over Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center. And the second comfortable win is between In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle and Get a Life Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I had kind of predicted that Get a Life Chloe Brown would be kind of a standout, but unfortunately, within 10 votes, In 5 Years took it over Get a Life Chloe Brown. So again, the popular Talia Hibbert is out of the competition. This was the bracket with the most amount of upsets, and while I kind of anticipated 1 or 2 knocking off the higher ranked titles, I did not expect 4 upsets in this particular genre. So let's start at, let's work up from the bottom. So From Blood and Ash between the Unhoneymooners, I kind of predicted that From Blood and Ash would be more popular than it was, but the Unhoneymooners took it by a couple of votes and has knocked off From Blood and Ash. So it is now out of the competition, which again is surprising to me because I had seen a lot of people read this over the past year or so. And next was probably the matchup that I was most interested to watch because of the current popularity of Outlander and the intensity of the Jane Austen fans. But Pride and Prejudice did pull ahead by quite a few votes over Outlander, so the higher ranked Outlander is now out of the competition. I would find it interesting to know the specific reasons outside of people just being a fan of Jane Austen as to why people didn't vote for Outlander. I featured this on my Good Books with Bad Reviews video, the romance version. I think it was the romance version, or the romance edition, excuse me. And a lot of people's reviews that I had selected to read from talked a lot about the poor handling of triggering content, particularly abuse, sexual abuse, and manipulation. So I'd be curious to know if a lot of people didn't vote for Outlander for that reason, because a lot of that is heavily featured in the TV show. Again, I won't know because I didn't ask, but in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking that's why, short of people just being fans of Jane Austen, didn't vote for Outlander. But it is now out of the competition. And probably what was the most surprising upset, in terms of no one voted for this particular title, but Jane Eyre was a huge upset over Whitney, My Love. No one voted for this, which is a little sad, but I guess a lot of people who follow me don't read airport romance novels. But unfortunately, really the only airport romance title that was on here is now out of the competition, and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte moves on. And the upset by a huge margin in the higher ranked champion books was, of course, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen over Gone with the Wind, which again surprised me. Now, I didn't necessarily expect Gone with the Wind to win, but I expected it to be more evenly matched than it was. But the Margaret Mitchell story is now out of the competition, and the second Jane Austen title moves on. Now, the fantasy sci-fi bracket played out very interestingly because there were quite a few interesting choices, I guess I would say, in terms of the close calls and the upsets. So we're going to start with the close calls first, just like all the other brackets, and the only close call that technically also is an upset within one vote was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern over The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I had predicted that this one would pretty handily take it. It did not. They were pretty evenly matched from the get-go, but towards the end of the voting period, The Starless Sea overtook Addie LaRue. Now, this was the genre that had the most comfortable wins. The first one being between The Fellowship of the Ring and Out of the Silent Planet. I pretty much expected that to be the case, that The Fellowship of the Ring took it over Out of the Silent Planet, but that's okay. We have another Lewis title in the competition, which happens to also be our second comfortable win over Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. And the next comfortable win is between 1984 and The Lies of Locke Lamora. 1984 took it by a landslide. Next, the most popular rookie release, which I had predicted as being one to watch in this particular competition between Crescent City and Harrow the Ninth. Crescent City won by a pretty wide margin. Not as big as I was expecting, but it still did win. So Harrow the Ninth fans held in there for a while, but unfortunately it is now out of the competition. And the last comfortable win for the Fantasy Sci-Fi bracket, again, was between one that I had predicted is going pretty far in the competition and a lesser known title. That is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo and Dark Age by Pierce Brown. Ninth House took it, again, with a pretty wide margin, so unfortunately Dark Age is now out of the competition. We had two upsets in the Fantasy Sci-Fi bracket, none of which I have read, so I can't really make any claims as to why one would win over the other, short of just there being more fans who have read one over the other. But the two upsets are between To Sleep in a Sea of Stars and Recursion by Blake Crouch. I think it's always surprising to me when a lower ranked title overtakes a one ranked title, which usually means there's something about it that's we need to watch it, keep our eye on it. But unfortunately, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini is out of the competition after being overtaken by Recursion by Blake Crouch, and then Dune by Frank Herbert has overtaken the Tolkien contemporary Robert Jordan, who wrote The Eye of the World, who also is endorsed by Brandon Sanderson. I missed that part on this particular book cover, so he had a few allies in his corner, but doesn't really matter because Dune overtook him by quite a few votes. And that's it. Those are all the results of the first round voting. This took a while. It won't take a while next time because there will be much less titles, but I'm going to quick reorganize my bracket so you know how things will be ranked for the next voting period. I'll be right back. Okay, everyone, the titles have been reorganized to be paired up for the second round. So let me walk you through who's paired with who. For our classics bracket, we have Little Women against Catcher in the Rye, Animal Farm against The Great Gatsby, The Book Thief against The Help, and Where the Crawdads Sing against A Man Called Uva. For the mystery thriller bracket, we have And Then There Were None against Girl on the Train, In the Woods against Shutter Island, The Guest List against The Turn of the Key, When No One Is Watching against Home Before Dark. And then for the romance bracket, we have The Princess Bride against Sense and Sensibility, Jane Eyre against Pride and Prejudice, Red, White, and Royal Blue against The Unhoneymooners, and Regretting You against In 5 Years. And then for the Fantasy Sci-Fi bracket, we have The Fellowship of the Ring against The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, 1984 against Dune, Crescent City against The Starless Sea, and then Ninth House against Recursion. Now I want to talk to you about why there are a few numbers on the board, because I personally, when I was totaling up the votes, really wanted to put an emphasis on the ones to watch, or the books that received the most votes in their pairings. And so for the classics bracket, the book that received the third most amount of votes was The Catcher in the Rye, and then the second most amount of votes was Little Women, and the book that had the most amount of votes in this particular bracket was The Book Thief, and that had actually the most amount of votes out of any book in this competition. So those are the three that I'm keeping my eye on in the classics bracket. And then for the mystery thriller, and third was Shutter Island, second was Agatha Christie, and the most amount of votes in the mystery thriller bracket was actually Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. And then in the romance bracket, the third was Jane Eyre, second was Pride and Prejudice, and the number one most amount of votes was Princess Bride, and that was mostly because of the overtime. And then for the Fantasy Sci-Fi, we have 1984, we had the third most amount, Fellowship of the Ring had the second, and Lewis actually beat Tolkien by quite a few votes in terms of the amount of people who voted for that particular title. Down here, they're OOT, out of tournament. All of these books down here, we'll do our little montage at the end, bidding adieu to all of the books that didn't make the cut. A few pairings that I am watching. Obviously, I'm watching Little Women because it dominated so hard over Tale of Two Cities. Obviously, The Book Thief. I'm watching The Bachman again in the classics bracket. I'm watching Agatha Christie, but I'm sort of maybe taking her a little bit for granted. I'm definitely watching this one right here, between The Guest List and Turn of the Key. I think both of them are really strong contenders. Obviously watching how The Princess Bride is going to do against an Austen title. I'm not real fussed about what's happening in the rookie releases in the romance bracket just yet. This is probably going to be the most painful one for me to watch, between The Fellowship of the Ring and Narnia. If I were voting, I would 100% pick Narnia. I've never actually read any of the Lord of the Rings books, but I have read, cover to cover, the entire Narnia series, more times than I can count. It is one of my all-time favorites fantasy series. It's on my favorites shelf over here. It would get my vote far and away. So, and then I think I'm watching this one in particular, again, Crescent City, because I know it is so popular right now, but the Starless Sea was a pretty big upset in the last round, so I'm watching to see how those two do against one another. I think that's really all of my predictions. I don't really have a whole lot. I definitely think The Little Women is going to do well, The Book Thief is going to do well, the Austen titles will do well, but most of them I think are fairly evenly matched, and I have a feeling that we're going to have quite a few more overtimes in the second round than we did the first round. So hopefully it's not going to be as frantic as the last time. But that is the entire second round bracket. So as soon as this video is over, the second round is open for voting. So please go ahead, vote. All of the voting, again, are split into 4 different surveys, one per genre, or you can go ahead over to Leigh Ellen's Library on Instagram. There's an abridged version of voting over there if you want to do that instead. A few reminders that in the survey voting, you don't have to answer pick a title for every matchup. It's not required. However, it will be during the Sweet 16, which is the next round of voting after this. Speaking of the Sweet 16, we're actually going to be taking a little bit of a hiatus from March Madness, just so I can play a little bit of catch up with making sure everything is organized and ready to go. And the giveaway that's going to happen for the person who correctly predicts the winner is all taken care of. So the Sweet 16 will be announced on March 25th, which is next Thursday. There'll be a little break, but you'll still get a booktube video here from me on Tuesday on popular bookish opinions. I'm excited for that one. I have a lot of them brewing. But just to give you a heads up that we're going to be taking a little bit of a break. And then once we do vote for the Sweet 16, it is required to pick a title for all of these categories. You can no longer skip. You have to pick one. So I think that's pretty much it. If you want any more information about the summaries or details about any of these books, the official Book March Madness website is down in the description, as well as links to all of the voting. Again, you can go do it on Instagram if you would like. I think that's pretty much it. There'll be some more housekeeping rules on the 25th regarding changes to voting and the giveaway. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to this booktube channel. It really does help me out, and let me know what you guys want to see. Also, I would love if you would comment down below and tell me, they're not going to be officially entered into the giveaway, but tell me who you think is going to win in any of these pairings, the overall tournament. Complain to me about which book you thought should still be in the competition. I want to hear any and all opinions. So comment down below or go comment on this post on Instagram. As always, a huge thank you to the friends and family who have readily supported me along this journey. It truly does mean the world to me, and I can't wait to see what's on the next page. So until officially we see each other for the Sweet 16, myself and King George bid you adieu.